Hello and welcome to the Beyond the Best podcast, the first ever episode. This podcast is going to be looking into the world of being an elite athlete and see what goes beyond the finish lines, the trophies, the medals, the titles. I really want to see what it takes to get where they are, because I think it's more than what any of us can really and truly understand. If you enjoy the podcast, please make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share. I'm on Instagram, Spotify and YouTube. So many ways to listen and enjoy. And I really hope you do enjoy it. Sport is something very, very dear to my heart. And I'd love to spread it and understand these amazing people and just get excited about their journeys and learn so much too. My first guest is a rower. They aren't just any rower. They are European champion, world champion, and off to the Paris 2024 Paralympic Games. This is just insane. So with no further ado, I welcome Gregg Stevenson. So if we just go back a little bit, the fact that you had an injury, there was a situation that led you to that. Could you explain a bit more about what happened, the before, the after?
Yeah. So I was very new commando within 5'9" commando, which was difficult to get to, in itself. And perhaps one of the best lessons I learned in life was volunteering to do the commando course, because of the arduous nature. It's a difficult course. It's 12 weeks for I'm Army, which is quite rare to become a commando. It's usually the Royal Marines commandos, but there's certain jobs within the Army that the Royal Marines need, as much as they'll hate me saying that. So being an engineer, I had a specialism that they were interested in, and I was interested in becoming a commando. So I went and did the All Arms commando course, and that was where I learned so much about my body, what it can withstand, how to manage it, because it was not very much sleep, not great, not great amounts of food, wet, cold, miserable. So I suppose it's one of the first times in my life I really had to dig deep in my mindset, and it was one of the first times in my life that I was really relying on my body to achieve an outcome. So it almost felt like being an athlete in some ways, in terms of like, this is pass or fail. This isn't, oh, did you win or lose in a football match? This is, have you climbed the 30-foot rope or not? Have you done the 30-mile march with your weighted kit in the rain on Dartmoor or not? This isn't, it's no bullshit. So yeah, that was the first time I really relied on my body. And nobody gets through that course without blisters, without a sore knee, without, low back pain, or whatever it is that seems to be, the difficulty for that person. And for me, yeah, learning how to manage that, not having to put 100% into every session. I was putting 95% in, but I learned, early on to manage myself, to do what I needed to do to pass that course. So after that, I went to the regiment thinking, I've earned a Green Beret, and I've kind of achieved this really cool status, to find out I was at the bottom of the totem pole. Yeah, I was the brew boy, and I had to earn my right and, upskill to the point where I was, the troop commander was confident in my ability to serve in such a prestigious regiment. So, yeah, that was that. But again, what a great learning curve, because I kind of thought, wow, I've got this bit of an ego developing, and I was 22 or something at the time, 21. But yeah, it was just a great lesson in life, to like, no matter what you achieve, there's also upskilling, and actually being able to consistently deliver that is really important. It's something as an athlete I take really seriously. So yeah, and on the back of me learning these skills over a couple of years, I went away to Afghanistan on my first operational tour. Predominantly did a lot of minesweeping, so looking for IEDs. That was the biggest threat out there. We knew that there was the number of deaths and casualties in 2009 was at the highest point of the entire campaign. So we knew it was a terrible situation, and unfortunately I found an IED. But yeah, and I think from that moment I kind of knew, I was pretty switched on in some areas, and maybe not so much in other areas, but I kind of knew my military career was over, because I had no intention of shuffling paperwork or being in a storeroom. And I kind of said earlier, you don't need me sat around with idle hands. So I kind of knew. I was like, look, and I think I'd worked so hard to achieve something and to be at a standard, to operate, that I knew missing 2 legs, it was very unlikely I was ever going to go back.
So what was going through your mind at that point in terms of what to do next? Because it's very clear that, like you said, there's a structure, there's a discipline that you clearly like to follow, and also being quite active, not really sitting down like you just said. How did you navigate that?
I really struggled. I think it was around 12 months of real struggle. I flew through rehabilitation. It's gold standard care. When you get injured, from point of injury, within 48 hours, I was back in Birmingham, Selly Oak Hospital. A couple of weeks after that, I was in Headley Court, this fantastic facility I'd heard so much about. Help for Heroes and organisations like that were, around, providing wheelchairs and anything you could possibly need, especially at that time because of the the attention Afghanistan was getting, rightly so, because of the, I would say rightly so, because of the amount of deaths and injuries. It was pretty traumatic to be around, to see the amount of, people that were coming back with life-changing injuries. But when I stepped away from that, I come from a small town in East Lancashire. It was difficult. It was difficult to sort of reconnect with that community after spending a few years, really at the sort of echelon of, a fighting force. It really focused on, I had friends going back to Afghanistan. I had, in other regiments, and people sort of building up for other operational tours, and I felt like that's what I wanted to do. And it was the difficulty of not being able to do that, and then the sort of difficulty of not knowing where I did fit in. I didn't attain a particularly great education, and then applying for jobs, courses, I felt like that really sort of impeded me, because I needed somebody to take a chance, or somebody to say, yeah, we'll look at these skills that you've developed in the military. And listen, I know I'm saying this, but it wasn't an intelligence issue at school. It was probably a neurodiversity issue, And now I'm, I've got a master's in psychology now, so I have sort of labelled myself with a few things, but also understand better that actually, if I can attain, that level of qualification, it was clearly my learning style, and like you said before, the military was an environment that really, for me personally, really got the best out of me.
How much of an effect has sport had on your life so far, in maybe before and afterwards? I guess it probably had different meanings in different parts, but it clearly has played a very big role the whole time.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I think perhaps prior to injury, I just took it for granted. I that's what I did. I'd be active. Hated sort of sitting still. Whereas post injury, one of the biggest challenges I had was finding that something to do, because I got really into running. I did a lot of rehabilitation, a lot of ups and a lot of downs, and a bit of lower back pain and other things that came with my disability. But I got really into running, which was great. I thought, right, this is it. I've got my thing back. Unfortunately, pushed it like I used to, and it was really hurting my lower back, to the point where I almost had them confiscated off me by the prosthetists, because they were just like, you're going to do yourself serious mischief here. I was having, medication, less time on my legs, and it just became apparent that actually, I was never going to get up to 15-20 mile runs on the prosthetic legs. It just wasn't going to happen. And I think there was a steep learning curve for me to, accept my disability, but also find things that I could do. And that's, thankfully where rowing came in, where actually, I could do 12 kilometres on the water. I could manage my posture better. I could do, more chunk strengthening exercises. And the more I learned about myself, the more sort of accountable I came. So it wasn't just sticking the legs on, going for a run, and, not doing the strength and conditioning. It was about, right, what can you learn from that? How can you get stronger? How can you make this more sustainable? I had no ambitions of becoming a world champion at the time. I just enjoyed it. I tipped up to the Invictus Games, which is like a sort of mini, almost like a mini Paralympics for service personnel only. And indoor rowing was one of those sports. And I just had a bit of I'd done it a little bit previously, probably with terrible technique, and only when my knee was hurting from running or something. But I kind of knew I could pull on it well, and I kind of knew it suited me, and I wasn't having the same issues because I wasn't loading the joints and the lower back in the same way that running seemed to do and upset it. So for me, it was a real good lesson to learn.
You then found rowing, throughout all of that, again, it's a physical thing. Clearly, in the time of you, I guess, having to rely more on your mental stability, like you through the rehab, and that's something I've always found quite interesting with sport as well. I think a lot of people can be physically elite. It's the mentality behind it, and I think that's probably the bit that we don't see so much. I mean, how did you manage to get your head in a space where you could apply yourself even when the physical part was probably not where you were wanting to be?
Yeah, and that prevented me from going to the gym or from getting involved in sport for, I would say, around 2 years, because I'd got to the point where I was doing the running and kind of, rehab. I was got to a level of fitness nowhere near what I was, but an okay level of fitness. I could wear my legs most of the day, and then when I had my first MSK issue with my lower back, I was completely off the legs. I was gaining weight. I was kind of like in a pain cycle where everything I seemed to do upset the back or upset something. So I was medicated, not sleeping well, perhaps using a little bit too much alcohol and other negative coping mechanisms, because I felt miserable and past time, and I didn't have a job. I was kind of not stuck. That's a terrible word, but felt like I was stuck in a small town in East Lancashire when really I should be in North Devon, doing the job. So I just got trapped in this environment, and it wasn't until I sort of unleashed or accepted or dropped the ego or whatever it was, a mixture of those things, I suspect, that actually I fell back in love with sport. And I had no intentions of competing at a level. I just knew I needed to lose weight, and that's where it started. I was like, right, I cannot be walking around and really hold my head up and be accountable to my prosthetist and the team around me to say I'm trying my best when I'm carrying excess weight, or this MSK issue needs me to develop a bit more trunk strength because I'm not doing any core exercises. I'm not, I'm reading the physio sheet. I might do it with the physio. Am I doing it at home? And then I suppose that competitive side of me came out a little bit, or accountability, whatever it is, the things I've learned, that I learned on the commando course, and that I'd learned, when I was playing, high school sort of football and rugby. It tends to be when people aren't watching what you're willing to do that makes a massive difference. And I realised that in a penny drop moment, only took me 2 years, but actually, like doing those small steps were really crucial. Once I was able to, stretch better, develop this trunk strength, it then opened the door to things like rowing, because I was like, oh, actually, I've developed a pretty strong core and trunk. That's a really good skill for rowing. That really helps. So that, I think, being accountable and just taking those initial small steps kept me interested and kept me sort of, without even knowing that rowing existed, really. It kind of opened a door that I didn't even expect.
You kind of touched on it a little bit. You say that this mindset change was like a flick of the switch, or was it on an upward spiral because you saw things were going in a positive direction, and then it sort of thought, oh, I can do this now, and actually I feel a bit stronger, so I'm going to test myself in this part as well?
Yeah, exactly that. It took a while. It really did, and I think it was like evidence based. Like I was a real believer in, I'd you'd speak to somebody and say, oh, have you tried a breathing technique? And I was that person like, oh, you're joking. Like, I feel miserable as sin. I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to, I'm like, I feel like I'm clinically depressed. And you're telling me to breathe. And I was like, almost like, it felt like somebody was like slapping me in the face. Like, not only do you feel a bit depressed, but I'm also going to give you really crappy advice. I was like, no, just fix me. Give me that tablet or whatever it is that does it. And then, but the nice thing about that was it actually, I caught myself feeling like that, and I thought, oh wow, like that isn't you. That isn't that lad who was willing to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go on sentry duty, to not get any sleep, to put his wet kit back on, and then run around Dartmoor for the day.
Yeah.
And I thought, now that's mindset, and that's the values I have, been able to achieve previously, and the values that I hold very, strongly, in my own sort of self-esteem and consciousness. That's what I respect. Not saying everybody needs to run around cold, but actually, putting the work in, putting the effort in, being accountable, all these things that I really, uphold. I would like to think I uphold, and I wasn't doing it. I was almost like having a pity party in terms of like, yeah, but I'm not going to lie, but my situation is terrible, and it has been terrible, but I wasn't making it better. You know, I was getting sort of more and more frustrated with the world, because it was almost like, oh, you know, who's not helping me? What, you know, why is nobody coming with any advice that suits me? And I was like, well, actually, when I looked into it, breathing techniques are like very, very well evidenced, been used for, you know, thousands of years by numerous, you know, sort of countries around the world, numerous religions. You know, who the hell is Gregg Stevenson to say that doesn't work? You know, and it was quite kind of a cool moment, because I was like, I saw the humour in it. I've always had a sort of dark sense of humour, or like a bit of a warped sense of humour, and I found it quite funny. I was like, oh wow, how entitled are you? You know, and it was that penny drop moment.
You've said a few things like accountability and just the discipline you have of yourself, where you almost don't let yourself slack. You don't let yourself come up with excuses, and you are in tune when you do. You're like, hang on a second, that's not what we're gonna do here. How much has that, do you reckon, played a huge part into where you are now with rowing?
Yeah. I think, you know, on reflection, and I think, like anything, it's a skill. And you know, in my day job before rowing, I was a mental health practitioner, and I used to try and talk about skill. I'm like, you are not going to wake up one morning and you know, feel like you've got all these, you know, tools in your toolkit that are going to get you through life. But guess what? Like anything, the more you practice it, the more sort of the more autonomous it becomes. So I think my first go at rowing in around 2018, I was thrown into it, which was cool, you know, and there was a very quick, sharp learning curve. I was a physical specimen, perhaps not very graceful on the water. I came from like a CrossFit background, so I was strong. I could move the erg, but on the water it takes time, you know. But I still hadn't quite developed the mindset to, I don't know, give myself a break, or, you know, push myself a little too hard. You know, I didn't realize at the time, but I was a bit too hard on myself. Didn't give myself that space to really develop and make mistakes, and, you know, not be the world's number one bloody rower. But actually, you know, the cool thing that happened with me to really cement this understanding of where I need to be as a person was stepping away from the program for a couple of years. Getting some other things going on in my life. So, you know, I had academia, started a family, you know, really looked at my lifestyles, alcohol use, good diet, just all these things, better sleep, just all these things that really made a massive difference to me. And I think when I got a call out of the blue to go back to rowing, and, you know, it felt again like, oh, I'm back at it, this steep learning curve where, you know, it is, I'm not going to lie, you know, there's expectations, there's times, there's no way to hide in rowing. It's probably one of the most black and white sports you'll ever get involved in, because you know how fast you need to go, and you know when you need to do it, and you've got a calendar and it's all in front of you. So it can be daunting, but I think this time I was able to take a breath and go, you are a complete novice at rowing. That's cool. That's cool. You're a bit of a beast on the indoor stuff. You're a strong lad. You've got, you know, you I believe you can do it. But just allow yourself to make those mistakes. And I think just unlocking that mental sort of barrier that was holding me back, you know, and I was probably trying to safeguard myself a little bit, really helped me develop. Because I was like, do you know what? I'd sit on a start line and be like, how mad that I'm here in such a short time, but do you know what? I'm going to give it 110%. And if I catch a crab, which in rowing terms is like a bit of a mortal sin, and I've done it, and still won a European Championship. So, you know, I got over it, and it wasn't the end of the world, and I still won. And I was like, even that, I was like, oh, this is a much healthier mindset to be in, where I'm like, and also I'm pushing past barriers that I didn't think I could get past, hitting times I didn't think we could hit. You know, we've set a world record on numerous occasions this season, and I think without that absolute just trust in yourself, and that absolute sort of empathy for yourself to say, you know what, if I make a mistake and we don't win, then it won't be through lack of effort, it'll be a genuine mistake.
So it's quite interesting, the difference in your mindset from when you first started rowing, you having your break and then going back to it. Obviously you've achieved incredible things since coming back. So do you think it's what you made for yourself outside of the sport that changed this mindset that you had, that maybe less pressure, less like you had less to prove because you were more content who you are?
Yeah, exactly that. I couldn't agree more. I think I wrote a dissertation on that. Just in terms of like my social identity, like And what I've observed in other, I sort of developed this very strong social identity as like, all right, I'm this commando that does this, and that was difficult to lose. And then I became an athlete, and it's like, right, I'm an athlete, this is what I do. And I kind of didn't develop or respect or acknowledge, the other things that were going on in my life that were equally as important. And if they weren't, like, again, accountability, like, why aren't they important? These are the things that are going to be around long time after I'm rowing. I want a good job. Or a job that interests me, and I enjoy academia. Like, I'm interested in psychology. I really want to be a good father. I want to be a good husband. Like, these are really important things. Like, don't poo-poo it just in the the desire to be a Paralympian or a world champion or whatever it is that was driving me at that time. And I think being, I just didn't realize how important that was, but having a few other things going on in my life and a few distractions and a few other areas that I really were passionate about and actually, could delve into. I mean, I never thought Gregg Stevenson would have a distinction in a master's in psychology, but I got into it and I was like, wow, what a great distraction from rowing, because I could do my rowing in the morning. When I was away from the family, it was a huge commitment, being down in Reading, but the afternoons I struggled, in my own headspace, or just not feeling like, what do I do? I'm being told to rest. I can't, we've already said I do have these issues with not doing something. So, right, throw yourself into, that interest of psychology, and got kind of absorb myself with that. And it was just such a cool thing to run side by side and actually just help. It constantly reminded me that rowing isn't the be all end all. My coach is probably going to hate me for saying that, but it's not. And I honestly feel like my performance improved like tenfold, because again, I was like, rowing's not, it's not, I'm still going to bring 110%. And I think I always will with something that I'm truly passionate about. But yeah, it's not the be all end all. And for some reason that just unlocked my performance massively.
Yeah, I think it's always quite interesting, because I think sport, anything, if you are passionate about it, I do think it's very easy to let your life be completely consumed by it, because so many studies that different things can contribute to the performance. But if all you think about is sport, I think it's unhealthy, and everything's healthy in moderation, isn't it? Even when you need to be the best of the absolute best. Quite interesting to see that once you got a bit more of a distraction, it was almost like the pressure just wasn't there as much, because you were happier.
Yeah.
Outside of that, and you had other things to worry about. So when you're on that start line and the pressure is massive, nothing I could probably ever imagine, it probably was a lot easier to handle, because there was an element there that wasn't the pressure. Part of the pressure wasn't there because you had something else going on.
Yeah. It was really funny, because I got interviewed of someone, I don't even know who it was, and they said to us, when we were going really well, we'd won the European Championships, first race, and then we went to Varese, set a world record, won the second race, and someone said, I'm interested in when things don't go right. And I kind of chuckled and went, yeah, I think we'll be all right. And I thought in my head, my instant reaction was, you think everything's gone all right? Like, we made so many mistakes in that race. Like, life's been quite difficult, not in a whinging way. I signed up to this. I knew the commitment in terms of travelling away from the kids, the wife, like, it's just difficult. The money's not great in rowing. It is what it is, but it's worth it. We've made a decision as a family that this is a really cool ambition, and we're gonna support each other through it. And it was kind of that really nice moment where I thought, wow, that's cool that you think everything's gone really well, because it's been really difficult.
Yeah.
So I was like, but the nice thing about that is, when we rocked up at the World Championships just recently, we were sat on our heats went really well, set a world record, flying, smashed it, couldn't have gone better. We did everything the coach wanted us to do. I was really happy with my personal performance, like my rowing partner Lauren was happy. And then we get to the final and the wind's coming in the wrong way, it's choppy, we're in a bit of a dodgy lane, and I'm like, oh, this feels like we've been robbed a little bit, like, give us a tailwind, and perfect. It wasn't what I perhaps had in my head, but again, I sort of chuckled and I was like, okay, cool. That's life. Whereas I think Gregg, in the past perhaps would have been knocked off or panicked or tried to do something heroic or something that I've not done before, where I was like, right, switch off, that you're at Caversham, it's a windy day, you've done plenty of them, let's go, roll your sleeves up and work hard, and let's see what we do. And it was that lovely weird feeling of, like, people talk about flow state and stuff like that, and I think that's the first time perhaps I've experienced that, like, calming of the mind really worked, and going, oh, okay, like this is going to be a different performance because it's not the idyllic, fast conditions. This is more of a workhorse. But I thought, who better than yourself to be that workhorse?
Yeah, absolutely. Up to that point, you dealt with some quite big negatives that not many people have to deal with. Not negative hurdles, I guess. Yeah. Is there any part of you that, when you decided to commit back into rowing the second time, that was a bit nervous potentially about having to deal with some of the negatives that just being a rower full stop is going to bring you? Sometimes performance isn't going to go to plan, all of that. Did you think that you were very prepared and well equipped, I guess, mentally to be able to deal with that, or were you a bit, let's try and see what happens?
No, I was sensitive, and I think we had an honest discussion. The nice thing was the coach had met me and worked with me previously before. Lauren, my rowing partner, had worked with me previously. It was a huge compliment for them to come back, because I thought, listen, if they thought I was a donut or I couldn't do it, they're not gonna come knocking on the door. Because British rowing, an elite performance environment, and I know, and respect what they've achieved in the past, and they know, if you can make the grade or not. So for them to ask, I thought that's in itself a compliment. But it was daunting, and I have been the nearly man, on a few occasions previously because of injuries and back problems, and you do think, and I did. Sorry, I thought, well, what if you injure your back, and there's that horrible feeling of, a lot of people know or encourage me to pursue things like these opportunities to go to the Paralympics, because I think I've trained with a lot of people. I've perhaps shown the raw attributes. But the difficulty is, you're dropping your defence, because you say, well, my ambition is to go to the Paralympics, and listen, that's easy for me to sit here now and say, as a world champion, world rowing's best time, and all that jazz. But actually, at the start of the season, when I was not been in the boat for 2 years, and I'm digging it out and trying to find a set of balls, and asking a coach up at Agecroft to squeeze me into their diary to go out on an outing, you feel like you're so far away from that actually, well, it was daunting. But I think in terms of self-esteem, trust, accountability, I was just like, do you know what, if I tip up to every session, the bare minimum, I think we can qualify for the Paralympics. So it's probably worth copping off about. And do you know what, if I don't, I think this time I was big enough to say, I'll happily have a conversation with anyone who's like, oh, you didn't get to the Paralympics. Okay. No, I didn't. I put a lot of effort in, whereas I think perhaps on my first, on my first try at rowing, I would have been really embarrassed to have that conversation.
It doesn't really matter, I suppose, the performance-wise, it's how you deal with yourself outside of the sport that really makes the difference, I guess, in the sport. And I don't think you see that a lot, or that discussion at least, a lot in the sport world, especially sports, I guess, have got less coverage, because when you do see it, it's just people on the race line going all out. No one knows the stories behind it. And I think it's really interesting to hear the development that you've had to go through to get to this point. And actually, the most success you saw was when you were probably the calmest, least pressured, pressure pot, even after everything. And it sounds like you've had to put an awful lot of work into getting to that point. That's something I would say, and it's something I said, in my professional side of my mental health practitioner role. It is like any skill. You wouldn't pick up 3 juggling balls and just expect to be able to knock it out of the park. It takes time. It takes effort. Practice, feeling a bit cack-handed, feeling a bit awkward. Like I said about the breathing techniques, I was like, how is Gregg Stevenson sat here breathing in through his nose and holding for 5? I was like, it's just not me. But actually, you know what, the first time I caught myself doing it sort of autonomously in a traffic jam, I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful, that my body's kind of tuned in enough to be like, you didn't even have to think, you just went to it. You were just sat there, a little bit of music on quietly with a nice little breath, and I was like, this is very cool. This is proper, mind management stuff, and this is, controlling yourself, being aware, and I like that feeling. It's cool. What is sport to you? If someone says you're an athlete, blah blah blah, what does that truly mean to you, and what that gives you, and all of that?
I think sport for me is an opportunity to compete. It's an opportunity to sort of push yourself, develop goals. It just gives you so many opportunities to develop skill. To try and be the best at something. Something that gets you out of bed with a purpose. it's something that I have to live my life around quite a strict routine, and I think sport is one of very few things that really gives me and a lot of other athletes I see that carrot that's worth chasing. That there's something about sport, and it's not just about money. Trust me, in rowing, it's definitely not about the money, but it's about that, like, what can we achieve? Once you start setting a few times where you go, okay, I think that's getting towards, perhaps a maximum of what I'll ever achieve. You realise that it's perhaps just another door that you're going, oh my gosh, I've just found something that's going to take us 5 seconds past that, or so the game never ends. It's really weird sitting here and saying, like, if you'd told me the times we hit this season at the start of the season, I'd have been like, oh well, that's enough to win the Paralympics. If we can hit that time, we'll just be cool with that. But now the Chinese in the world rowing final really came at us, so now we know we need to push on even further. So it almost feels like we've got that second season now where it would have been really easy to just keep doing what we were doing, but actually, the cool thing about sport is it's constantly wanting more from you. It's constantly, trying to rein you in. And I think that's where it's really important to, bring that good mindset, that level of empathy, trust, respect. Yeah, and respect's a good word, like respect for yourself, to be like, it's attainable. Nobody's, I've got a great relationship with Lauren, my partner, and my coach. I don't think anyone would have sat on that table and picked a time that we didn't think we could achieve. And it excites us all because it's a project. And I think that's a cool thing. The other cool thing about sport is it brings like such random people together on this really singular focus, and just gives you that opportunity to perform at your best. And it's like, when we do that, it's such a cool, such a cool feeling to pull it off.
Can you imagine your life without sport some way or another?
Oh no, I really can't. I get quite competitive on the tiddlywink, so it's like it only takes me and my 2 boys and my wife. We can go on a I don't know, a day trip to the shops, and before we know it, we're flicking something at a can and see who can get closest. And it's just it is that, and we love watching loads of different sports, and I'm just inspired by people, especially people who perhaps face up to diversity. I know I always enjoy sort of like endurance sports and sports where there's a lot of mindset involved, and listen to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books about sort of ultra athletes and people that have achieved these incredible feats, and it's just inspiring and gives you that lust for life.
It's one of those massively underestimated things. I don't think as children, when you grow up, I don't think sport is quite made as big as it possibly should be, because I really do think it changes mindset. It teaches you so many things and life lessons that you don't learn in the classroom. And I think, a bit like we said, it has respect for yourself. I think if you understand what your body can truly do and what you can do to make it even better, it's mad how that can put you in a different situation in all aspects of life, not just when it comes to rowing down the river or all sorts of different competitive things. We're coming towards the end, and I'll just ask you my final question. If you were sitting here asking you a question, what would you ask yourself? What would be something that you probably feel that doesn't get asked enough to you that people should know about?
I've been thinking. I thought our big aim at the start, of this entire project was to win a Paralympic sort of gold medal, and it was like really clear. It was like that. I know. It might not have been like said in conversation, but I kind of knew that was the expectation. I'm rowing in a category where, my partner has done that on the previous 2 Olympics and Paralympics, and that's the expectation. So I would probably ask myself, how I almost like dealt with that situation, but also how much I enjoyed the World Championships and like how much I've enjoyed the smaller steps to get there. And that's, I don't know if it's a question or a learning thing, but really to enjoy the process and enjoy those steps, because they're the steps it does take to get there. Listen, if we'd not performed well at the World Championships, we wouldn't be rowing at the Paralympics. So having that one big goal really sort of taught me, and I'm really glad that I was switched on to the facts. I think it would have been easy to, almost like, cool, next, what's next? But I've really enjoyed those moments of recognition, just to say, these small steps have been pretty sweet. They've been really nice, and even when it's not particularly gone well, you might be on a tough training camp, or there's a couple of times over the season where I got COVID, or you know, like you've not hit the score you needed to in your 5K erg, or whatever that is, that challenge is. But it's about like just holding that sort of desire, that turning up, that accountability, that, you know, getting out of bed with that purpose. And that's what I've enjoyed. I've enjoyed the journey, and I'm really glad to say that. I'm really glad that it's not just become this like be all end all thing. So I'm like, you know, if it ended tomorrow, you know, God forbid, you know, with an injury, I'd be really proud of what I've achieved, and that's a really like sweet feeling.
It's because you've made yourself enjoy it. Well, you've not made yourself. You've acknowledged that every moment is a really important thing you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for doing this. I've really enjoyed listening. And that is the end of the podcast now. You'll find me on Instagram, Spotify and YouTube, and also on TikTok. So if you enjoyed it, like, follow, comment, subscribe, do your thing, and I'll see you very soon.